Hello everyone, I am excited to start the chapter 3 overview of Outwitting the Devil with you. I hope you are all enjoying this as much as I am, learning about the higher selves and the ways that we are manipulated. So let us jump right into it. In the previous two chapters, we heard Hill talk about these many temporary defeats that he has. They brought him closer to discovering who his higher self was, and he also gave us several examples of how he learned to connect with his higher self and started to communicate with him. So if you're unfamiliar with how, those first two chapters are really great to read because it helped recognize when Hill himself was coming into contact, and those might be some ways that you are getting contacted as well. The next thing that I find really interesting in this book is the fact that Hill uses the phrase wheel of life. I couldn't help but wonder if he already knew about tarot cards. That really made me interested when I seen it in there. I did not pick up on that the last 3 times I read the book. And then he goes in to tell us that he's got one more temporary defeat that he needs to talk to us about. And it's really important that he tells us these stories because they are what's going to help us realize how the devil uses his tricks on us. And of course, after this temporary defeat is when his actual interview with the devil starts. So, from what I gathered from reading this chapter, the reason that Hill encountered this last temporary defeat was because of the economic depression at the time. His books weren't selling like he expected them to, and he was unable to get a job in the teaching degree like he wanted. Fear and poverty were around every corner, so of course no one was buying into his philosophy, and no one was really spending money around that time. So he realized that this time of temporary defeat was a perfect time for him to actually put his knowledge and books to the test, because up until this point, he had not actually practiced any of the information that he was preaching. He also saw it as a good opportunity to test out the theory that every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. So simply put, when we face a temporary defeat, we learn new advantages and ways around future temporary defeats of the same nature. So as Hill is sitting in his own energy, he's realizing that all of these old feelings he once had are coming back. He's sitting in lack of courage, he's sitting in self-doubt, he's sitting in indecision, he's sitting in lack of self-determination. And finally, he realizes that the one thing he forgot about his entire preaching is that he forgot to find a group of masterminds to help carry out his plan. Up until this point, he had not found any like-minded people to continue to grow with, and he had just been a lone wolf. And so what is a mastermind? A mastermind is considered 2 or more people who join together to help form ideas and form a definite path forward. So before we begin with the actual interview part, I want to explain why I think he was capable of doing this. So when Hill was practicing getting in touch with his higher self in the first 2 chapters, I believe that practice unblocked all communication barriers. And another way for me to describe what I believe happened is Hill became a medium. He became an open channel for whatever to come through. So from what I understand about mediumship, we can communicate with whoever we want. They can misguide us and they can mislead us, but they can never lie to us. So by the end of this book, you're going to have a clearer understanding of how they like to use words to misguide and mislead us. And this is why I believe that grounding, cleansing, and protecting on a daily basis are important. It allows us to have a safer space for that communication to come through so that less mind games can be played with us. So, jumping into the interview, we find out right away that the devil says that he controls 98% of the population. That's a huge number. And he's damn proud of how he does it, he says. He gloats about how he manipulates us. So we also find out that he, meaning the devil, has no physical appearance. Instead, he describes himself as negative energy. He is the dark to the light, the negative charge of an atom, the negative thoughts that exist in our minds. He exists in everything and everywhere, he says. So, the opposite of that, which is what most of us call God, is considered to be his opponent, and he holds the positive charge to everything in the world. So, he's the light to the dark, the positive charge in the atom, and the positive thoughts we have. He is love, hope, faith, and optimism of everything. He is also the positive factors in the universe. So, he is the whole reason why the planets and solar systems stay where they are and do what they need to do. So the devil goes on to tell us that together these two must work in balance, otherwise there would be no us. And when I look around, I guess this is really evident to me. It's masculine, feminine, fear, faith, light, dark, oxygen, carbon dioxide, wealth, poverty. All of those things. We have all those opposites. The one thing that did catch my eye is the devil did say at some point in time in this chapter that he did want complete control over everything. So if this balance needs to remain, then his complete control would have never worked to begin with. So we are then given the 6 main fears that are used against us at some point in our lives, and some of us experience these all at one time. We got poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love, old age, and also death. Poverty and death are claimed to be what the devil uses to instill fear into us the most. He does this by instilling fear into us, making us believe that if we are a bad person, we are going to go to hell, where we're going to be forever damned by him. Now, of course, he really doesn't have this control over us, but he sure is good at making us believe it, isn't he? He cannot punish any of us except through our minds, where he uses all forms of fear against us. He loses the control of people when we start to think independently for ourselves. Okay, so touching base on what his world is like, he says that time and space do not exist where he is. I found this fascinating. Again, something that did not stand out to me the last 3 times I read it. He best describes himself again as the negative energy to everything. His favorite place, he says, to live is inside of our minds. And he says the space he can take up inside of there is completely dependent upon what our mindset is like. So that really stuck out to me the 4th time around reading this book as well. He says the more negative we are, the more space he can take up, the more he can manipulate us with more of his tricks, and he just simply waits for his moments to use his tricks on us. Another part that I found interesting in this chapter, there's lots of interesting parts in this chapter for me, is reincarnation. It's always been a question in my mind, and the first 3 times I read this, again, it's something that didn't stand out. It's a question that I've asked my pastor, which really helped me come to the conclusion that I also am going to spiel here. So, reincarnation has always been a questionable thing to me until I realized that our souls stay here on earth, allegedly awaiting for the return of Jesus. So once those words actually dawned on me, reincarnation didn't seem that far-fetched anymore. And the devil basically mentions the same thing about the reincarnation process when he says in this chapter that he works really hard to make sure that our mindset is as negative as possible when we pass away, so that when we're reborn, we're automatically born under his control. So basically, he's saying he's making sure that we die asleep, so that we wake up asleep. I found that fascinating. So, as a temporary distraction, Hill now changes the subject, and Hill asks the devil what's up his sleeve. And he says this about poverty. He says that it really holds us back and makes us feel hostage with no way out. And I don't know about you guys, but that really rings true for me. When the money isn't flowing like it needs to, I do feel held back. I feel like I can't get the things that I need to for my animals, my pets, and I feel like I definitely can't do the self-care that we're supposed to be doing. So the next thing he talks about is ill health, and he says that anyone with ill health is discouraged from thinking positively, and it's always keeping them in a fear, in worry and fear energy. And this was super, super true, because I know a lot of people who deal with health problems, and they are some of the negative negativist, if that word, people that I know. So it's really fascinating to learn this stuff, you guys. So next on Hill's chain of demands, he asked the devil who his greatest enemies are. And of course, again, I found this fascinating that his answer to this was so simple and it made so much sense. He says, anyone who inspires people to think and act for themselves is someone who is a threat to me. So if I encourage you to think and use your own intuition, I am a threat to the devil. And then he gives us some examples of this. He says Confucius, Emerson, Abraham Lincoln, and then he adds that Hill is not doing him any good either, and I can't lie, I literally laughed out loud when I read that part again. So when asked to explain the dynamic of how such people are a threat to him, he brings up the Rockefellers, which, go figure, another fascinating thing that I found interesting to read. And I'm not going to dive into this part as much as I could, because I want you to go find it in the chapter and I want you to read it for yourself. And then the one thing that I want you to keep in mind as you're reading this book is how long ago it was written and how many things have changed since then. Like, I'm interested to see what you guys have to say if you're willing to go that extra mile with me. Okay, so, and if you've been reading this chapter so long, you're going to notice that Hill changes questions and topics frequently. And the reason he's doing this is because the devil is trying to use a whole bunch of words to try and confuse us into drifting. So, when we talk about the youth, he claims to entrap them with the use of alcohol and cigarettes. Now, alcohol makes sense to me because this is a natural depressant. But cigarettes, Hill asked an explanation for, and I'm really glad he did, because I would have never thought of this. So cigarettes break down the power of persistence. They also destroy our endurance. They make us lose our ability to focus. They close off our imaginations and so much more, he says. He says that any habit which weakens our willpower invites more of these experiences to us, which in turn makes it easier for us to be manipulated by him. He says smoking is a learned behavior. So when I thought about this, I'm a smoker. My parents were smokers, are smokers. My dad's passed away, but he died smoking. Maybe when it comes to people who are smoking, maybe something like a past life, not past life, whatever I'm trying to say, maybe a healing needs to be done specifically for that, because, you know, he is right. It is an inherited behavior, and it's up to some of us to break the cycle, which for some of us is easier than others. Why not use energy healing to help us, right? Okay, so Hill pokes the bear and makes the devil a little angry. I liked this part. In turn, the devil lashed out and he begged. He basically said that begging is God's job, not his. And so I mean it's true, because faith is linked to the positive side of everything. So I mean, not necessarily begging, but how do I explain this to you? Okay, so when we're begging for something, we have basically lost everything, and we're trying to we're looking to God to fix everything, which he cannot do. It's up to us to have faith to begin with that continues things moving forward. But going along with begging, there is that belief there that God can help us, which is faith. So it's a stepping stone to where we need to be going. And the devil is very proud to admit that he takes everyone and anyone he wants with cleverness and force. Okay. Deep breath. All right, many of us grow up believing that only after death are we supposed to encounter this thing called the devil. As we are beginning to learn in this book together, it appears that he is here with us on earth this entire time and is always hard at work, right? So, he's always waiting to use his tactics to manipulate us. He destroys our right to our true freedom when he uses his tricks, because he's manipulating our brains using fear and other tactics that he's going to admit to us. And, you know, I've grown up my entire life always saying that we really do live on hell on earth. And so Hill said this in the book, and I was like, oh, wow, like maybe I was on to something my whole life saying that. It could be heaven or it could be hell. What do you choose? And so the devil goes on to tell us that mass fear is another one of his favorite things to use to manipulate us. And some examples of this are world wars, economic depressions, terrorism, racism, separation. I mean, if you look around at what's going on in our current year of 2020, hello. All right, let's end chapter 3 by being reminded that when we gain the ability to think for ourselves and use our own intuition, the devil loses control over us, and we start to be able to manifest whatever it is that we want. So in our next chapter, we're going to learn more about these tricks that the devil uses on us and learn ways to defend ourselves. I am sending you all lots of love, lots of light, and many, many blessings. Namaste, my friends.